And verse 6, I saw the woman drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. Through the years, not only the Roman Catholic Church, but many other denominations have persecuted the true saints of God. It's a fact. I've read through church history, and through the years, it is in millions that the true saints of God have been persecuted and killed by this religious system called Christianity, which did not follow the Word of God, and did not follow the truth, and did not follow the Lord Jesus Christ. You've only got to read in history about what is known as the Spanish Inquisition, conducted by popes who tortured people, monks with crosses round their neck, tortured people, burnt them because they would not submit to the Pope. It's horrible to read of the things that they did 700-800 years ago. Amazing. They're drunk with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. This is true. Things have got a little more refined now, but the Lord's kept a note of all this. And when I saw her, I wondered greatly. And the angel said to me, why do you wonder? Verse 7, I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw was and is not, and is about to come out of the bottomless pit. Now, human beings are not sent to the bottomless pit. Human beings, when they die, if they're unconverted, they go to hell, as Jesus said in Luke 16. The bottomless pit is the abode of demons. So when it says someone comes out of the bottomless pit, it's a demon. It's a demon who's going to be in charge of the Antichrist. Just like there are demons who are in charge, evil spirits who are in charge of various world rulers. And when it says he was and is not, that means the same demon at one time was in charge of one of the world's great empires. We saw in another study of the world's great empires, Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. One more is going to come, the Lord told John. And after that, the 8th one. And the 8th one is going to be the same demon that was in one of these 5 that were there before Rome. One of the world rulers, the same demon that controlled him, who is now back in the bottomless pit, is going to come back and rule the Antichrist. That's the meaning of verse 8. The beast that you saw, this Antichrist, was, the spirit in him, was one of the world rulers, perhaps the ruler of Greece, the spirit that ruled Alexander the Great, maybe the one that's going to come back into the Antichrist. Is not, that means in John's time when Rome was ruling, that spirit was no longer there, gone back into the bottomless pit, but will come out and will finally be sent back to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. And here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And they are 7 kings, or as we said, 7 kingdoms. And in John's day, 185 have fallen. Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Medo-Persia, and Greece. 5 had fallen. 1 is, that is Rome. The other has not yet come. We don't know which the other one was, whether it's communism or some other government that has come during the last 2,000 years. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. In verse 10 onwards, a brief review of world history. And then we come to verse 11, the Antichrist. And the spirit in the Antichrist is going to be one who was in the earth before. Was and is not, is himself an 8th and is one of the 7. That is, one of the 7 spirits that rule the leaders of one of these 7 kingdoms. Which one, we don't know. He finally goes to destruction. And the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings. That is, 10 nations who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. And that is the hour of judgment when God is going to judge the world. And so we see there are going to be 10 nations that are going to band together. And there's one nation that's going to rule these 10. That's why I said it could be a group of 10 nations in Europe. It could be Russia and 10 of her satellite countries. We don't know. However, it's going to be headed up by one person called the Antichrist. And these satellite countries are going to give the power to the one who is the ruler on top. And they have one purpose, verse 13, and they give their power and their authority to the beast. Now, it says here they're going to be united and they're going to wage war against the Lamb. Now, I want you to turn to Daniel chapter 7. I want to show you a verse there which says something about this. If you want to study it later, Daniel 7 verse 24 and 25. It says here in verse 24, as for the 10 horns, out of this kingdom 10 kings will arise. That is the 10 kingdoms in the last day. And another will arise after them. That's the Antichrist. He will be different from the previous ones, and he will subdue 3 of the nations. Out of the 10, he's going to subdue 3. There are going to be 7 others, and he's going to be the 8th. And he will speak out against the Most High, and he will wear down the saints of the Highest One. He will try to make alterations in times and in the law, and they will be given into his hand for 1 year, 2 years, and half a year, which means 3.5 years. And then the court, verse 26, of the Lord will sit for judgment, and his dominion will be taken away. And then the dominion, verse 27, will be given to the saints. That is when Jesus establishes his kingdom on the earth. And so we see this is how it is going to be. And then back to Revelation 17, to the bride of the Antichrist. It says here in verse 14, these will wage war against the Lamb. That is when Jesus comes down and sets his foot on the Mount of Olives. And the Lamb will overcome them. It's not going to be a big war. It's just going to be a matter of a few moments. With the word of his mouth, he's going to destroy them. Because he is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And those who are with him, that is the 144,000, the bride, they are called, chosen, and faithful. Many are called, few are chosen. And fewer still are faithful. Notice 3 things here. Called, chosen, faithful. It's a blessed thing to be among those who are not only called, not only chosen, but also faithful. Are we faithful? In the little things, our faithfulness is tested. It's not in the big things, brothers and sisters. It is in the small things of life that God tests our faithfulness. Little things in daily life. There we prove whether we are among the called, the chosen, and the faithful. Most believers are found among the unfaithful, careless and unfaithful. Blessed are those who take it seriously, to be faithful in the little things, faithful to the smallest commands of Jesus. And he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues, which means the harlot has spread her influence over the whole world. And then, notice what is going to happen. The 10 horns which you saw, and the beast, these will hate the harlot. You see, the political power is going to use this religious system only for its own ends. And once their own ends are accomplished, then they have nothing more to do with this. For example, I remember during the last election in the United States of America for the President of America, that was 4 years ago, 1980. There was a huge chunk of the American population which claimed to be born again. And therefore, both the people who were contesting to be president claimed to be born again. Because that's the only way to get their votes. of these people who claim to be born again. You see how much it has penetrated into such a powerful country. Politics and religion. Yeah, that's just an example. But finally, when the political power has made use of religion for its own ends, then they will hate the harlot and will make her desolate and naked, will eat her flesh and burn her up with fire. For God has put it in their hearts to execute His purpose by having a common purpose and by giving their kingdom to the beast until the words of God should be fulfilled. God is going to allow judgment to come upon false apostate Christianity by the political power with which she held hands. He's going to destroy her. The Lord doesn't have to destroy her. That political power will destroy her finally. Just wait and see. And the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Now, chapter 17 speaks about Babylon as a religious system. Chapter 18 speaks of Babylon as an economic commercial system. It is religion plus money working together. And right from the beginning of the history of the human race, you find there were two types of religions. Adam, among his many sons, he had two sons about whom the Bible speaks, Cain and Abel. Was Cain a religious man? What do you think? He was. It says he came with an offering unto the Lord. He had a form of godliness. Abel also came with an offering to the Lord. And it says the fire of God, and I believe that's the way the Lord approved Abel's offering. The Lord accepted Abel's offering, which means supernatural fire came down from heaven and consumed it, and Cain saw that, and he felt jealous because no fire came on his. And he slew Abel. That was the beginning of the fulfillment of verse 6 of Revelation 17. What did we read in verse 6? The blood of the saints. The woman was drunk with it. Who was the first person who shed the blood of a saint? Cain. Was he a religious person? He was. To whom was he offering a sacrifice? Was it to a false god? Was it to a heathen god? Was it to Vishnu? No. It was to the true God. But there was a corruption in his religion. There we see the beginning of Babylon. And there we see in Cain and Abel the beginning of Babylon and Jerusalem. The false religion and the true. Growing up in the same home. Drunk with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the witnesses of Jesus. And we read that God wiped out the sons of Cain during the flood. And Noah came forth from the flood. He was a descendant of Seth, not of Cain. There is no descendant of Cain in the world today. I hope you know that. They were all wiped out in the time of the flood. But Noah, a division came among his sons. He had a godly son called Shem, and he had an ungodly son called Ham. And Ham was cursed, and Shem was blessed. Through Shem came Abraham and the Jewish race and Christ. Through Ham came, if you turn there for a moment, to Genesis 10. It's very interesting to see how what you see in the end of the Bible starts off in the beginning of the Bible in Genesis chapter 10. Ham was cursed because he did not respect his father. It's very interesting to see that his curse began with a lack of respect for authority. That is part of the beginning of Babylon, when people don't respect authority. When children are not taught to respect their parents, you're breeding them for Babylon. Chapter 10, we read, Ham had a son, and the name of Ham's son, verse 6, was Cush. One of his sons was Cush. Verse 8, Cush became the father of Nimrod. And he became a mighty one on the earth. And he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. That means against the Lord. And they used to say, like Nimrod, a mighty hunter against the Lord. And the beginning of his kingdom was Babylon. That's where Babylon began. And you read about it in chapter 11, where they built this Tower of Babel, which was a sign of rebellion against God, but it began with a man called Nimrod. Now, I want to just take a few minutes to give you something from secular history, which is very interesting. Nimrod, this doesn't come in the scriptures, but secular history tells us this. Nimrod, who was the grandson of Ham, the cursed one, had a wife, and the wife's name was Semiramis. Nimrod was a great hunter, and history tells us he rid the world of wild beasts, and so he became a sort of world leader, a type of the Antichrist. And he was finally slain violently. There was a prophet in those days, that was Shem, who was still alive, the son of Noah, prophesying the truth, a picture of the true church standing up against the abominations of the Antichrist. Nimrod was slain. Nimrod was a person who was almost worshipped by people, but he was slain. And Semiramis, his wife, when she saw that her husband had died and that her power would now go, she did something very clever. She was a very adulterous woman, like Babylon, the bride of the Antichrist. So was Semiramis, the wife of Nimrod. And she had a child through her adulterous life. And look at her cleverness now. When this child was born, she said, "This is Nimrod come back to life." And so began the worship of the mother and the son. I want to tell you, this is not a Roman Catholic idea, the worship of the mother and the son. It began in Genesis chapter 10 in Babylon with Semiramis and her son. And there were images of mother and son around the world hundreds of years before Christ. This is history. This is the beginning of Babylonian religion. Now I want to show you two Old Testament verses. Jeremiah 44. This is before Christ, remember. Jeremiah 44, verses 15 to 18. Israelites also got corrupted with this Babylonian religion. It says here, Jeremiah 44, verses 15 to 18, all the men in Jeremiah's day, 600 years before Christ, who were aware that their wives were burning sacrifices to other gods, along with the other women. And they came to Jeremiah and said, to Jeremiah verse 16, "As for the message you have spoken, we're not going to listen to you, but rather we will certainly carry out every word that has proceeded from our own mouths by burning sacrifices to whom? To the Queen of Heaven." Do you know there was a Queen of Heaven 600 years before Christ? That originated with the wife of Nimrod, Semiramis, and pouring out libations to her. Verse 18, "Since we stopped burning sacrifices to the Queen of Heaven, pouring out libations, we have lacked everything. But when," verse 19, "we were burning sacrifices to the Queen of Heaven, and our husbands were making little wafers in her image and poured out libations to her, then we were blessed." This was the idolatry that was going on in those days. And this Queen of Heaven had a son. You read of that son in Ezekiel chapter 8. Ezekiel 8, verse 14. "Then he brought me to the entrance of the gate of the Lord's house, which was toward the north. And behold, women were sitting there, weeping for Tammuz." Tammuz was another name for the son of Semiramis, the mother and child, the Queen of Heaven and Tammuz. They were weeping for Nimrod, who had died, but who was resurrected in this child of Semiramis. This was Satan's counterfeit of the death and resurrection of Christ. And so began the worship of the mother and the child. And what was the name of this child? Tammuz. And the first letter of Tammuz was the T from which began the sign of the cross. The sign of the cross. That is not a Christian or a Roman Catholic origin. It is Babylonian. It all began there. That T was the cross with which they marked themselves, the sign of the cross. This was linked up with the worship of the sun. And that's why they used to have round wafers symbolizing the sun, which they used to eat. And around the heads of these Babylonian gods would be a picture of the sun, which we today call a halo. It's actually the sun. It began with sun worship. And behind Semiramis' head would be the sun. Behind the head of Tammuz, the sun, the child would be the sun, what we call the halo. This is the Babylonian religion that has penetrated Christianity from the time of Constantine and corrupted it. And it has spread into all branches in various ways. Do you know that history tells us there's an amazing book, if any of you want to read it, called The Two Babylons by a man called Alexander Hislop, where he says rosaries, candles, lamps, everything, vestments, priest garments, idol processions, everything began there in Babylon. It was all there. It was taken over by Christianity when Constantine became the emperor of Rome, and today blindly Christians follow that. And this is what led to immorality. It's amazing if you were to read the history of some of the popes who lived 1,000 years ago. They were so immoral. They had multitudes of illegitimate children. And all types of immoralities went on there. That's the result of false Christianity. Now this is not only there. Rome is the mother of harlots, but there are many, many daughters. Adultery has spread to leaders in Protestant churches, Pentecostal churches. Moral, physical adultery, spiritual adultery. And then